So good evening and welcome to our online information session about the proposed 2023 budget. As I mentioned to our attendees, we've switched to a meeting format to make it easier for us to have discussion with our smaller group tonight. So tonight's session will be recorded so that we can share it with those who weren't able to join us tonight. And I'll ask Angela to move to the next slide. So I'll just start off with a few introductions. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Joanne Kleb. I'm the city's communications and engagement manager, and I'll be facilitating our workshop tonight. And with me is Angela Campbell, the city CFO and our director of finance and administration. And she's the one that will do the bulk of the presenting on the budget. I'm also very pleased that Councillor Miller is on the line tonight. Hello, Councillor Miller. I see you just joined, so thank you for joining in.
Hi, everybody. Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, that's great. And also we have additional staff on the line who are here to answer questions if we need. And so I just want to say hello to Elma, Courtney, Amber, and Andrea, and thank you all for giving up your evening to be here tonight as well. Next slide, please, Angela. And so as we always do in these sessions, we just want to take a moment to acknowledge that tonight's meeting is taking place on the traditional and unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan people. And we're very thankful for the opportunity to have our meeting here tonight. So just a few quick tips on how we'll run tonight's session. It's pretty easy when you have a smaller group as we do today. But what I will ask is that you just hold your questions to the end. Angela is going to go over a fairly short presentation that's going to give you the nuts and bolts of the budget. You can keep your cameras on if you like. It just makes it a little more conversational, but don't feel any pressure there. We do ask that you keep your microphones off. And most importantly, we hope that you'll be open to the views of others because people do have different priorities and interests in the budget, and we want to hear all voices. And so at the end, we'll ask that you kind of let us know either through, raising your hand or in the chat. Let us know if you'd like to ask questions, and we hope that you will ask questions. So take note of them as we go along here, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts once Angela shares her overview.
Great. Thank you, Joanne, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It's great to see so many people engaged in the budget process. On the agenda for today, I'd like to give an overview of the financial plan, reviewing what's new for 2023, some high-level budget highlights, and then the proposed tax rates. So this year, the financial and corporate business plans have been amalgamated into one consolidated document, which better ties in the city's corporate initiatives into the budget. This document has been further enhanced to provide more information to the public on what's included in the plan, what services the city provides, budget highlights, and the financial impacts to our residents and businesses. So revenue and expenses each increased 7.5% respectively from 2022 to bring the amounts to $134.8 million for revenues and $115.3 million for expenses. These figures are net of the taxes that we collect on behalf of other governments. And the difference between the revenue and expenses here, that amount goes into reserves, which funds our capital programs as well as some of the other operational needs. Focusing in more specifically on the general fund, revenues in 2023 amount to $68 million, which is up $6 million from 2022, just under a 10% increase. And expenses in 2023 amount to $63.6 million. These are up $4.2 million from 2022, a 7% increase. A large portion of the general fund expenses is allocated to protective services, which now makes up 41.5% of the overall general operating budget, which is up around 1.5% from 2022. Some highlights from the 2023 general fund include an increase to gaming revenues up to $2 million, which is based on the results of the 2022 gaming year, which saw a return to pre-COVID levels. In addition, recreation revenues are being increased by $400,000 up to $2 million annually, not quite returning to pre-COVID levels, but a significant improvement from the year before. And also the city saw higher than anticipated return on investments. And as a result, we were able to increase our investment income by $2 million up to $3.7 million. Some of the financial challenges that we saw during the compilation of the 2023 budget include the 2022 taxation deferral that was approved during the previous year deliberations, in addition to normal and extraordinary inflation that we've seen across many city functions. So these challenges have resulted in a shortfall of just over $6 million in the 2023 general operating fund, which is comprised of $3.7 million for the taxation deferral, $1.3 million for inflation and operational expenses, and an additional $1.1 million for priorities and initiatives. So during the deliberations in November of 2021, Council approved the deferral of 7% of taxation into future years with the use of the remaining COVID-19 Restart Grant. This was primarily related to the significant community safety initiatives that were being added into the budget in that year. In addition, when setting the final taxation increase for 2022, Council approved a further deferral of 3% of taxation into future years for a total deferral of 10%. The plan was to phase in the impacts of these deferrals over the course of the next 3 years, which starts in the 2023 budget cycle, with the use of surplus reserves used over this timeframe to offset the difference. Forecasted draws of surplus funds to balance the budget until the deferral is fully incorporated into the rates are in excess of $3 million. During the public engagement process as part of the 2022 budget, one of the questions that was asked through this Shape Your City feedback was about the community safety initiatives and the public's thoughts on if and how those initiatives should be funded. 80% of the public that responded were in favor of the community safety initiatives that were included in the financial plan, with the majority of those suggesting that funding over 3 years was preferable. Across BC, we've seen many municipalities that are proposing significantly higher than normal tax increases to deal with inflation and downloading of provincial costs. Penticton is just one of many communities that are faced with challenging budget constraints while striving to remain fiscally responsible. These news highlights are just some of the communities that have recently announced their tax increases for 2023. As part of the budget process, Council brings forward notice of motions. There were 6 of these that were brought forward by Council on December 20th, with 5 of them being approved and either incorporated into the financial plan or costs of the initiative will be presented to Council for their consideration during deliberations. Notice of motions with financial impacts have been incorporated into the budget and are reflected in the priorities and initiatives figure where applicable. Some of the key strategies that we use to address the fiscal challenges that the city is seeing for 2023 include continuing with the steady approach to taxation by phasing over the deferral from 2022 in 3 years while utilizing reserves to offset losses, continuing to look for revenue generation opportunities, and seeking alternative funding sources such as grants. So although on paper, the city has significant reserve balances, many of these have restricted uses, leaving only a small portion that are available to draw from. Once the statutory, utility, and other restricted reserves are removed, a balance of $20.8 million of reserves is available for general use as at the end of 2021. So year end is currently underway and revised 2022 reserve balances will be provided to Council with the presentation of the audited financial statements. However, should draft balances be available by the deliberations next week, we will update these figures for Council deliberations. So again, these balances are as at December 31st, 2021. And there's the reserves that are available to offset the phasing in of the tax rate deferral set to continue until 2025. These balances don't incorporate, however, the estimated surplus draws that are being used to offset the deferral and the addition of the 4 firefighters. Okay, so the draft financial plan also includes $27.8 million of capital expenditures across all the funds. Some highlights include the initial cost of the community safety building, the community center Bugaboo University renovation, and a new 100-foot platform fire truck. As the city has recently updated its asset management investment plan, the breakdown of the updated replacement costs of city assets now sits at $1.4 billion. This graph is showing the city's forecasted debt to 2027, including funded projects for Ellis 2 Dam in 2025 and a further expansion and upgrades to the advanced wastewater treatment plant in 2026. Also shown is a forecast of debt levels should the unfunded projects for the community safety building and the twin arenas be debt financed. As those unfunded projects have not been fully costed, those amounts are currently rough estimates and funding sources have yet to be identified. The 2023 utility rates were presented to council in December, with the fees and charges bylaw being adopted December 20th. Rate increases include 2% for electrical, 4% for sanitary sewer, 0.6% for water, and 20.2% for stormwater. Based on those increases that were approved through the fees and charges, the average residential property will see an increase of $61 per year or $5 per month. And for a business property, the average increase for utilities in 2023 is estimated at $380 per year or $31 per month. Okay, so as noted earlier, the 2023 funding shortfall is comprised of 3 areas, which represents a taxation increase of 3.3% for the phased-in tax deferral and a 3.4% for maintaining operational service levels and inflation. That brings us to the base amount of 6.7%, which is to maintain current service levels. And I just want to note here that staff worked really diligently to lower this operational increase, which reflects only half of the 2022 CPI figure of 6.9%. In addition, a 3% increase would be needed to fund the priorities and initiatives that are included in the financial plan, which would bring the overall increase to 9.7%. I just want to note here as well that without that tax deferral, the city would have been looking at a tax rate increase of between 3.4 and 6.4%, well in line or below other municipalities for 2023. And also just wanted to mention here that in the financial plan, what we've actually built in is an average rate of 8%, and that'll be adjusted based on council's decisions through the deliberation process. Right, so in terms of impacts to the residents and dependent obviously on council's deliberations, this graph represents that the average increase to property taxes to a residential home would be in the range of $10 to $15 per month, or $121 to $176 annually. Impact on businesses show that the average increase to property taxes to a business property would be in the range of $40 to $58 per month, or $475 to $688 annually. These figures assume a revenue neutral business tax multiplier of 2.22. So the data shown on this slide is collected by the province of BC and allows us to review our residential competitiveness to other areas in the region. These figures include municipal rates, parcel taxes, utility bills, and taxes paid to the other taxing authorities, so it provides a reasonably holistic overview of the cost to residents in these areas. As you can see from this graph, Penticton is very competitive in the valley, having one of the lowest residential taxes and charges in comparison to West Kelowna, Kelowna, Vernon, and Summerland. So for residents, when taxes are combined with the average utilities increase, the average residential home would see an increase of $15 to $20 per month, or $182 to $237 annually. For businesses, when taxes are combined with the average utilities increase, the average business property would see an increase of $71 to $89 per month, or $855 to $1,068 annually. And as previously noted, these figures assume the revenue neutral business tax multiplier of 2.22, which I'll discuss now on this slide. So currently the increases have been estimated using that business tax multiplier of 2.22, which is using the revenue neutral approach as per council policy. So the revenue neutral approach is calculated on a class by class basis. When assessment values change, the tax rate is adjusted so the dollars remain the same. Under this method, whatever increases passed by council, each class would see that percentage equally. So council generally discusses the multiplier during budget deliberations, but as we don't have final 2023 assessments yet, staff will present updated information to council when tax rates are set in April, and then a final decision can be made at that time. Okay, so at this point, I would like to open up the discussion for any questions.
Great, thanks for that, Angela. Yeah, maybe stop sharing your screen for the moment and we can bring it back up if we need to, but we'll just say hello to the group tonight. Hello, everyone. Hello to those who are brave enough to put their cameras on today. So let's get into the questions. I see no one's put their hand up yet, but I know who I can call on, and her name is Lori Goldman. Too early, Lori?
Yes, so I do have a few questions. I see that the electricity charges are quite high and water and sewage is quite high. And I'm wondering what the city's plan is to reduce those expenses, excuse me, when we could be requiring every new building and every commercial building and every large parking area to have solarized photovoltaic systems that would be feeding electricity into our utilities, which we own or operate. We don't own them. And that would reduce costs and increase our resilience. That's one question. And the same thing with the water and sewage. We have very high water and sewage costs. And I'm wondering what, I didn't see in the plans anything about getting people to, instead of having lawns which require huge amounts of water, to insist that every new development be xeriscaped, properly xeriscaped with help. Rocks are not xeriscaping. And like Phoenix is doing that because of their climate crisis, they are requiring people to get rid of their lawns and put in native plants, pollinators, things that require very little water. And because we are in a climate crisis, and because of that, we have to look not just at our economy and our budget. We have to look at how we're going to be more resilient and sustainable. Because of climate issues, all of these things are going to escalate. And by changing our ways of doing things and requiring new builders and even encouraging homeowners more to solarize and to incentivize them to get out of their cars, so our infrastructure isn't so expensive. If people have rebates for e-bikes and are able to use the active transportation, our costs for painting the roads and fixing the roads will definitely go down. So all of these expenses can actually be lowered if we encouraged people and incentivized developers to actually help us to reduce our costs instead of just accepting our costs.
Thanks for that, Lori. Yeah. So Lori, you've asked some really specific, great questions about our climate initiatives, and Angela did have a slide to talk about how this, it may not address the specific concerns that you're raising, but there are a number of initiatives that are included in the 2023 budget that are intended to advance our community climate action plan. And maybe, Angela, do you want to just share your screen and you can bring that up? And while Angela's doing that, I would just offer, Lori, we are having an open house on Thursday from 4 to 7. And Kristen Dixon will be there, our General Manager of Infrastructure, talking about our utility rate review. And I think she'll be a good person to answer some more of those specifics as well. Go ahead, Angela.
Thanks, Joanne. So yeah, definitely, Lori, the city does recognize the importance of climate action, and through our climate action, our community climate action plan and our corporate and energy emissions plan. So in the financial plan, we've highlighted these plans and our moves in action towards reducing emissions. So in 2022, we did purchase several electric vehicles, including e-bikes. We installed public charging stations, and we continued on with the home energy loan program, also the work on the lake to lake bike route. And then in this draft financial plan, there's the installation of 4 electric vehicle fast charging stations, implementation of the Low Carbon Transportation Accelerator Fund, evaluation of the Home Energy Loan Program, a builder developer workshop for EV ready requirements, and creation of an emissions dashboard on the city webpage. So definitely hear you, Lori. And actually some of the points that you've made, there are things that, like Joanne mentioned, our GM of infrastructure, there are some of those things that we are starting to have some conversations about. And I think through their resiliency study, some of those things might come out as well.
Yeah, and I would offer on like the utility rate review, one of the things we're going to be asking the community is if they're interested in seeing an inclining water rate, if I said that correctly. But in all, what it means is that we'd like to see higher consumers of water pay more than those who are motivated to conserve. But those are some of the things. And Lori, I'll give you a chance to comment if you like, and then I'll be picking on some more folks to ask some questions.
It's really great to hear that there are discussions and thoughts and plans about waste reduction and you know, electricity planning and things. I understand that the city has some plans. I can't see this. I don't know where this climate action slide is in the document that was downloadable. Maybe somebody could post in chat where we could see this slide, because I can't make it out.
It's on page 20, Lori, of the draft financial plan. It's on page 20.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I guess I'm just a little more concerned that climate is moving faster than we are. And because of that, if we don't move actually quicker on some of these big changes, like I understand we have canopy, we all, you know, canopy tree plan.
Yep.
If we were selling trees to people with water bags, right away we could be reducing heat in the city. It said somewhere that we had a parks planning and capital project coordinator, but I looked online and I cannot find that person. Maybe someone could put that person in the chat so we would know who that person is. It said that they were hired in 2022. And yeah, I guess I know that managing a city is a huge thing. I'm worried that we are not looking at ways of reducing some of these things that could make a huge impact over years, but also make a big difference very quickly. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Lori. So I think I know who the person is that you're referring to, but I'll have to confirm that and send you her information. I think you've spoken to her previously. And thanks also for bringing up the urban forest management plan. We are going to get going on that right away. And I like your suggestion about having the trees with water bags. I don't know what that is, but I'm very, very keen to look into that. So thank you very much for that. And also, you've got Councillor Miller on the line here. And if you come to the open house on Thursday, a lot of your comments are really politically, political comments, and it's about council giving us the direction to be more aggressive than perhaps our community climate action plan support. So thank you for that. Okay, I don't see any more hands up yet, so I'm going to turn it over and to Lorraine Stephenson. Lorraine, do you have any questions for us?
Sure, I have a couple actually. Both of us here spent quite a lot of time going over the whole document, and I haven't had to look at a spreadsheet for a long time. And it left me wondering if there is some kind of training for city councillors for how to read these particular pieces of information, or do they just come to the budget meetings with their own basic knowledge? I would find it very difficult.
Yeah, I'll let Angela answer that one.
Sure. So Lorraine, they actually just went to a training course last week. And part of the reason why the budget dates were designed the way that they were was to give them the opportunity to go to that training session before they went through a budget. So I don't know if there was like a spreadsheet training, so to speak there, but part of that training was meant to sort of educate council on budget process and best practices for municipalities and get them a little bit more up to speed, especially the new councillors that haven't been on before and going through a budget. So absolutely, there are opportunities for council to do that kind of thing before they get into this process.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And I noticed, pardon me for asking this, Joanne, but I noticed an expenditure in the communications budget for $600,000+ and I wondered if that includes salaries or is it projects or what is it?
I might let Angela answer that.
Yeah,
My
that's fine. I wasn't sure if
is,
we're going to tackle that one.
well, no, I believe it is salaries. I believe that we've incorporated a person who was on contract before, so those fees would have normally gone to a different part of the budget, and now it's more cost effective if we bring that person onto our team.
Yeah, so in the communications budget, it would be both consulting costs as well as staff costs. And as Joanne mentioned, one of the things that we do when we look at our overall costs is make a decision on if we're spending more on a contractor than we would on an in-house employee, does it make sense to bring that in-house? And it actually often saves the city money and gives us more hours and more expertise in the building as opposed to paying a higher consulting fee
Okay.
for less hours.
Okay, and my other question related to that was about the jump in expense for mayor and council from last year to this year. It looked like it went up about 2 or 3 times. I don't have the thing in front of me right now, but it went from 63,000 to 118,000 or something. I just wondered why that jump was there. Sorry to put you on the spot, Angela.
No, that's okay. So I'm
Yeah.
just looking at the mayor and council page. So it didn't really change that significantly. In 2022, the budget was 319,000, and in 2023, it's 347,000. And the difference from that was really training, public engagement, that kind of thing. What you might be looking at more so is that there was a reduction in the overhead credit that was applied to that department, and that changed, but it actually went down and not up.
Okay, I have it written on a piece of paper upstairs, but I'll if it still is on my mind, I'll bring it to the meeting on Thursday night, if you don't mind.
Yeah, for
Thank
sure.
you. Thank you very
Of course.
much.
Great. So I've got a few more folks that are brave with their cameras on. Would Jack or Gary and is it Valentine or Valentine? Yeah. Why don't you address us, please? We'll start with Gary, and then we'll see what is on Jack's mind if he's interested. Hi, Gary.
Thank you.
Valentine, is it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Mhm.
lovely.
Well, I do find it very complicated, Angela, because I'm not familiar with all the, all the different accounts and the percentages and so on. So having said that, it seems to me we've got quite a few new buildings in town. The new hotel on Eckhart Avenue and the one going on Westminster, and the expansion to the Lakeshore Hotel several years ago. The new huge block of apartments on South Main by Skaha Lake, and others, I think, also on the south end of town. We live in the north end of town, the Northern Gateway, as we're calling it now. And also all the different buildings that we see going up. And I would have thought that the increase in taxes for those buildings, sometimes, like on Westminster, there are 3 4plexes going up, where there were, I think, 4 homes, 4 families. Now they're going to be 12 homeowners on that property. So I would have thought that possibly the increase in development around town would have accounted for quite a bit more taxes coming in to the coffers.
So we do include, and it's called non-market change, which is basically the new development money. We do include that every year in the budget. So we actually get a report from BC Assessment that tells us how much new assessed values have been introduced into the city through development. So actually in 2023, it's one of the lower years that we've had. It was only $400,000 versus last year in 22, it was actually $600,000. So we incorporate that into the budget to help offset any inflationary costs right off the bat. So you're absolutely right. We do get that money and we do incorporate it into the budget to reduce any taxation increase.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. It is complicated, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time to try to understand it. And I know Angela's team's worked very hard to try to make it consumable. So hopefully you folks can go out there and take the information you've learned and share it with your friends and neighbors. So Jack, you've got your camera on. Are you open to asking a question?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, good. First off, I'd like to also mention how difficult it was to read the financials. I'm quite familiar with financial statements, and it took me quite a long time to get through this. So I can imagine somebody that hasn't read financial statements would be at a complete loss. And now my question is like dealing with the SOEC complex, the operating budget. I'm curious as to why the expenses for Memorial Arena are going to drop significantly from 2023 onwards?
Oh, that's a good question, Jack, and I'm actually not sure that I know that off the top of my head. I'd probably have to look back at the reports that we got from the SOEC and look at that specifically and get back to you. I don't recall the reason off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
Okay, there hasn't been any more talk of shutting down the arena then?
Anything to do with the arena will be coming back through council for the twin arenas. I just flipped to the SOEC complex page, and Memorial Arena, the costs are pretty. You're talking about because it went from 61,000 down to 9,500? Is that what you're referring
Right.
to?
Correct.
If I had to guess, Jack, I'd say that there were probably just some significant operational repairs that we did in 2022.
Okay.
That aren't forecasted to be in the future, but we can confirm that for you. Anything to do with those arenas, when the twin arena sort of discussion happens with council in terms of replacing and what rinks that we need, that's when they'll have to make decisions about the existing arenas and what the community needs for ice space. So those will all come to council and they'll drive the decisions on what we do with the arenas.
Okay. Now, also regarding the SOEC, the revenues are $200,000 for the year. Is that including ice rental, concerts, everything else that goes on at the complex?
So it's a good question, Jack. So we don't account for that information in our budget because that's well, it's now OVG, the Oakville Group. That's their revenue and expenses. What you see in our budget is we're taking into account the expenses for their deficit because that's what we're required to fund. The revenues that you're seeing, that 200,000, there's some lease space in that building and some other miscellaneous recoveries that we bill out for. That's the city's revenue, not Spectra or OVG. So that's all that you're seeing in there, not their actual financial statements. And you'll see if you watch the budget deliberations, Dean will be there doing a presentation, Dean Clark, on their budget, and you'll be able to see a breakdown between the facilities and all their revenues and expenses.
Okay, so the expenses for the SOEC complex then are continuing on in the $2 million range for the foreseeable future. Is there no expectation from the city that the complex will begin to generate a profit at some time?
That's an interesting question, Jack. So the reason that we're seeing the expenses sort of continue on at that higher level is because costs have gone up significantly since COVID. So labor costs are significantly higher, food costs are significantly higher. So it hasn't returned back to a pre-COVID level that way. I'm not aware that, and I know I've seen, I think Lorraine, you said something about that the facility was supposed to be financially sort of standalone. I honestly don't recall that ever being anticipated. To me, it would be similar to like a recreation center where it's generally subsidized. Entertainment type facilities generally are subsidized and don't operate, like aren't able to generate enough revenues on their own to pay for itself.
Okay. So basically though, the taxpayer is paying for that complex to operate then, correct?
They're offsetting the deficit. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
similar to what we do for the recreation center, other recreational type facilities.
Okay. Okay. So my next question, and it's not directly related to the budget, is why is there no public access to the offices of the SOEC?
When you say public access to the offices, you're meaning to talk to them or to see their information?
Yes. For example, I wanted to discuss a schedule for Memorial Arena, and I went to the SOEC, and they told me I couldn't go into the offices to talk to anybody. Now, I would think that being that it's financed by the public, that we should have access to the people who work there. What's going on behind the scenes?
So they are a private business. that has a contract with the city. So they don't have the same level of, I'd say, transparency or availability to the public as City Hall would. Right. So it would be no different than a business that sort of leases out or has an agreement with the city to operate a service. You know, there wouldn't be the expectation that they would operate the same way that we do. I would be surprised to hear that if you requested to meet with them, that they wouldn't accommodate that. I do find in the past that they are really good about meeting with people and discussing concerns.
I've had no problem getting a hold of them on the phone. It was
Oh, okay.
just a visit. But my concern is that as a taxpayer, we're putting $2 million a year into this business to keep it running. And yet, who's watching? Who's monitoring what's going on in there?
So the
How do we know?
Yeah.
How do we know that they're losing money every year and we're having to continue to contribute this $2 million to them?
So as part of their contract, there is accountability measures. So for example, they're required to send their financial statements to the city. So there is absolutely a level of transparency that, you know, they're not operating over there and the city never sees anything that they're doing. Anthony Haddad, our general manager of community services, he's the liaison staff member. So he actually works quite closely with them in developing their budgets and any changes that they're making at the facility, anything that they need to do. He works with them from a staff to contract level.
Okay. So the city is confident that things are going well over there then?
I think the city is confident that
and
we
we're not-
maintain, that we maintain a level of transparency. We're aware of what's going on in that facility.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and so Jack, thanks for those very difficult questions. And I just want people to know that, you know, Angela will do her best to give you answers, but we are taking notes so we can relay your questions and concerns to council so that they are aware of the types of interest that the community has. So I've got that written down, and thanks very much for that, Jack.
Okay, thank you.
I think,
Great.
Lorraine, did you have your hand up?
I think there's some merit to what Jack was asking. And because when the private operators were given contracts for Skaha Marina, we were all told in the press, basically, what the arrangements were financially. And we've never had that for the Penticton Bees or the hockey school. And Angela, I realize that none of this is pinned on you, but that's a question that's out there in the public right now. And I know I'm not the only one asking it. And I hope that Donnie Mr. Van Dyck will be at the session on Thursday so that we could maybe get to the bottom of some of that. You know, we don't mean to pin this on you, Angela, definitely, for sure.
No, but like Joanne said, we appreciate everyone's comments and they're things that we can take back to the group. And yeah, certainly if you're coming to the open house, those are discussions that can be had there as well.
Yeah, and without getting into territory I'm unfamiliar with, but you know, I believe it's a question of competitiveness, and that's why some of the details are not disclosed. Is that fair, Angela, or is that also not?
Yeah, I'd say there's proprietary information that goes along with profit companies versus non-for-profit. So depending on the agreements that the city enters into, like say Skaha is a different situation because it's being operated by a not-for-profit and they're required to publish their financial statements anyway. So it does vary agreement to agreement, but I definitely do hear what your concerns are.
Great. Dennis, you have a question? You'll have to unmute your microphone, please. Lorraine, can you unmute? Oh, you're looking for it?
There you go. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Dennis here. I'd like to just dive in a little on what's been said, because I noticed in the financial plan process, there was a reference to an arena use analysis. And my question is, what's the output that's coming from that particular analysis, and how would it be used to address questions such as those that Jack has posed?
Yeah, so I think if you actually refer in through the financial plan, there is more information on those initiatives in each section, but the arena use is really starting to look at exactly the information I sort of mentioned when we're talking about the arenas. what does the city need for arenas? What does that look like? How much ice time is needed? In order for us to make any decisions about arenas in the future, we'd actually have to start tracking use now so that council has enough data to make those decisions. So that's really what that project's about.
I think that's a good business practice.
Yeah.
There was another question in that, but I'm not sure I can. Yeah, there was under the category of assets and capital borrowing, it said there was 2 unfunded projects, 25 million for community safety building, but 35 million for the twin arenas. So are those going to be independent of the SOEC campus, and what are those particular arenas? What exactly are they?
So at the moment, those arenas aren't really anything. They're just a placeholder in the budget until council makes a decision about what they want to see. But one of the things the city's trying really hard to do is take a look at our overall capital picture and make sure that we know what's coming in the future. So you'll see in the financial plan, there's actually $96 million of unfunded projects. These are all kinds of things that have been identified by staff or by council as something that's going to maybe have to happen in the next 5 years. But we don't necessarily have them fully scoped or costed, but we don't want to lose sight of them either. So decisions that they make today might differ if they knew that that other thing was coming 4 years from now. So we really just are trying to paint the picture, but those costs could be completely different than what we've initially estimated. And at the time when we have different costs, council might make different decisions. So yeah, they're really just a placeholder as a identified item that's been brought forward that we're not quite sure what it's going to look like yet.
And I wouldn't mind jumping in there too, Angela, just to give people context that those were 2 of the 4 recommendations that came out of the Civic Spaces and Places plan. So that was the plan that was trying to come up with a long-term plan for the city's buildings that were deteriorating, and how which ones, and prioritizing which ones needed to be looked at initially, which ones we could push off and look in the long term. And so the first one that was prioritized was the need to replace Fire Hall number 1. And that's where the community safety building is coming in. It'll replace Fire Hall 1, and we're looking at it as an opportunity to address some other space needs for protective services. The next project that was identified as a priority was is it the Twin Arenas? Or no, that one's still 4 to 5 years out. I'm trying to remember, but in any event, it identified that those buildings were going to need a decision in like 4 to 5 years. And so the funding for them is included on the budget, or not included, it's unfunded, but the projects are listed on the budget so that people are aware that these things are coming. But there is an extensive process that will be undertaken for each one to prove out a business case to determine if it's the right thing for the city to do. So Civic Places and Spaces, that's where you'll find the background on those things.
Thanks, Joanne.
Okay. And so how about Kona? You've raised your hand so nicely. Kona, do you want to turn your camera on and address the group?
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Kona.
I am just jumping in because there was a list mentioned in that bit there. There was like, I guess, 96 million unfunded projects and stuff. Where can I find the list of the projects that they already see on the horizon so that I can just cross-check that?
Yeah, for sure, Kona. So in the financial plan at the very back is the capital pages, and the unfunded is detailed at the bottom. There's a summary page that has sort of a high level, and then every single page inside each departmental page will have a listing underneath the funded of the unfunded projects.
And sorry, can you repeat the document name again? Just
Yeah, that's in the draft financial and corporate business plan document.
okay.
At
So
the tail end, the very end is the capital, and you'll see all the unfunded is detailed in there.
perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have any more questions coming from the group? I see Councillor Miller has lightly put his hand up. Councillor Miller, you want to address the group?
Yes, I just want to answer the last 2 questions. That a report did come before council on Tuesday, February 28th, which was a public meeting. And there was a little bit of discussion about it. And if you're interested in reading what was presented to council from staff, Penticton.ca, and then council meetings, I believe, and then it's pretty user friendly. And if you find the one from the 28th, you'll want to read the agenda package. And furthermore, you may wish to watch the council discussion on it. And they have it neatly earmarked, so you don't have to watch the whole meeting or go hunting for it. You can just press on whatever the item is. But I think if you were to read that and watch the council meeting, that may answer some of your questions.
Thanks, Councillor Miller. I think you're referring to Anthony Haddad's presentation on the facilities.
Absolutely. And we
Okay.
discussed, again, as you repeated, I believe the report said that, well, actually, I know the report said that the emergency center, fire hall, and other services are the priority. And I do believe that arenas were ranked as second according to this report. Again, nothing is written in stone about it, but I think some of the questions I've heard tonight, I would encourage people to look at that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a tricky balance, planning for the long term while, recognizing that we do have a public process to go through before any of these things happen. How about any of our other folks on here who are staying hidden? And it looks like Gary might have a question for us. Go ahead, Gary. Just unmute yourself first. Still muted, Gary. Let me see. Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah, my wife and I are both old age pensioners. We've been living here in Penticton now for 16 years in the house here in the same place. But during the 16 years, I'm 85 years old now. My wife is a little younger than I am. But anyway, I have seen a gradual increase in all of these amenities that you've talked about tonight. They've all gone up. All gone up. We don't know why they've gone up, but I can tell you one thing: my wife's old age pension and my old age pension has not gone up, and we're still living on the same amount of money we've been living now for the past 15 years, and we're managing. And if we can do it as a couple, why can't the city of Penticton do it? Why can't they do it too? Why can't they put some more effort into it, into balancing the budget, rather than just increasing everything?
So Gary,
That's my
I
question.
do, oh, sorry, are you done?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I definitely hear your concern. We do have a lot of taxpayers here that are on fixed incomes, and that is very challenging. I do want to assure you, we go through a very rigorous process in developing the budget to keep the cost as low as possible. But there's inflationary things that impact a municipality that don't impact individuals. So for example, fuel, insurance, chemicals to run the treatment plants and the pool, those things all raise sometimes exponentially higher. And as a municipality, those are the services the community wants us to provide. The cost of those things does rise, and we don't have another method of generating income outside of our user fees and taxation. So it is a difficult balance, but I do want to assure you, we don't just pass along costs. There is a very rigorous process that goes into our budgets. And these are things that council has to decide in terms of, do we keep the same service levels that we've been providing to people, or do we reduce them to decrease our costs?
Great. Oh, thanks, Gary.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but if we're able to live within our means, it takes some effort to do that.
Yeah, I hear you, Gary.
Why can't the city live within its means? I mean, I know I'm not against building this bicycle lane, although it's double now what it was supposed to be initially, the cost. And I know everything has gone up, and whether there's a good excuse for that, whether it's warranted or not, I don't know. Time will tell, but it just seems to me like, because of this stupid COVID crap we went through here in Canada and all around the world, it's the whole economy is out of whack because of that. But we got to come back the common sense and common reason and realize that we have to, every one of us has to be, we've learned to be responsible for what we have and we've learned to live within our means. And if we can do it, and I'm sure, I'm a senior, as you know, and most of the people in this, a lot of people in this Penticton here are seniors. And if they can do it, live within their means, why can't city council?
Yeah, and Gary, thanks for that. I think it's more of a comment than it is a question. And I think that we can include that and relay it to council as well when we share the feedback on our engagement. So thank you very much for that. I do want to fact check though, the cost of the bike lane has not doubled. It's still about 8 million, and that's what it was said to be initially. So just want to make sure we're clear on that with this group. But okay. I don't see any more hands up. Does anyone else have some questions they want to ask?
Joanne, it's Jack.
Oh, hi, Jack.
Hi. I don't know how to raise my hand, so.
Okay.
Just along the lines of the comments that were just made, why, if we're trying to watch our expenses closely, why do we continue to give money to nonprofits such as, or I'm sorry, not nonprofits, for-profit businesses such as the Penticton Bees, who I believe there's a $50,000 expense item for them, and Ironman, which is $400 and some thousand. Those are all, they're small amounts in the overall scheme of things, but a lot of small amounts amount to big amounts, right?
Yeah, thanks very much for that. And I do know that there is a philosophy around the contributing to the economic vibrancy of the community and the importance of using the SOEC and ensuring that that ice is used and creating vibrancy in the community for not only people going to the games, but generating revenue for the city from the sale at the concession. But, so that's my understanding. Angela, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I would just say I agree with you, Joanne. I think the philosophy behind funding not only those profit ones, but a lot of our nonprofit events is that they draw a lot of people to the community, which helps impact our economic stability for restaurants and hotels. And so I believe that, you know, there's an investment that the city makes towards bringing people into the town that benefits the greater of the city.
Yeah, and
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Understood if you don't necessarily agree or would maybe pick and choose different events, that's definitely understood. So
Okay.
Lori's got another question for us.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. I was wondering if there's any kind of a, I didn't see anything, it's very complex, this document. Is there anything in the document about using public land, city-owned land, to build some sort of affordable housing, public housing for our community? Because we have a lot of seniors who will not be able to live in their homes any longer, and we don't want them to be homeless, but we don't have any affordable housing, and we do have city-owned land that could be developed for non-profit, owned by cities. In Europe, a lot of the cities, like Germany, is full of public-owned housing for citizens to be able to live in and still be able to have food and medicine. And we don't have any kind of a system like that. And I'm wondering if that's been planned in the budget to do some sort of housing. I know we have affordable housing in there, but is there something the city is actually building and using our land to do?
Yeah, good question, Lori. So actually on page 43, you'll see that there's an economic development initiative for attainable and affordable housing development. And that is having the city look at its own land for use and development for affordable housing projects. So that's definitely built into here. Council will see that when we bring forward the deliberations, because there is a cost associated with it for their approval of $50,000.
Hey, Lorraine and Dennis.
Okay.
Further to Angela, your comment, the 50,000, is that to direct a study or an analysis of the availability of certain lands? Is that the objective of trying to identify lands, raw lands, pre-existing lands that are ripe for redevelopment and so on? What's the target there, please?
Yeah, so it is a development project. So it is like a study that they would be doing, taking a look at city lands, identifying what would be possible, and then maybe looking at partnering. It'd be a good question for, like, I'm not driving that project, but it would be a good question if you're coming to the open house to talk to Anthony Haddad about, because that's actually within his area of economic development. But yes, it is along those lines. It's a study to start looking at that.
Sure. I would just be also keen to ensure that the kind of community impacts are, they're not all positive, and there's the risks of negatives, as we all know. And so
Right.
in rolling that into the portfolio of the clients, it would be important to know, but also how the ones that have you know, less than suitable or desirable side effects on neighborhoods really be built into this, because with a simple bold statement, or we'll be rushing towards housing. I think there was kind of plenty of mistakes made on that throughout this country and the US, or to establish that, you know, it's going to have to be better than Regent Park revisited.
Yeah, and are we distinguishing between supportive housing and attainable housing? Because I think what we're talking about is not supportive housing. Is that fair? That's not what this project is looking at. That's in the purview of BC Housing.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe
Is
it's
that what you
affordable
mean,
housing,
Lauren?
not
Yeah.
sustainable housing. And I think too, Dennis, just on your comments there, one of the other things that's built into the financial plan is a refresh on the official community plan. So looking at neighborhoods, figuring out where things, you know, where things belong, and also how the city has grown versus how we thought it was going to grow when the OCP was done back in 2019.
Sure. Music to my ears. I hope that you pass that on to the planning department. Thank you.
And sorry, Dennis, just to clarify, the music to your ears was
When you were drawing those distinctions
Okay,
of those
yeah.
housing categories, but
Yeah.
also how that would be considered in a proper planning analysis, because I think we've
Yeah.
watched some fairly ad hoc location decisions made, you know, fairly recently and before. And so to kind of go that extra mile in the location, rather than just rushing to something that is quick and available, look at it in the fuller context, and particularly how consequences on surrounding properties are going to be factored in and managed.
Thank you, Dennis, and I'm counting on you to participate.
Okay, I will.
Okay, do we have any more questions from the group? If you're all enjoying yourselves still, Angela has a few questions that we actually anticipated that you haven't brought up yet, but there's some good information there. So maybe I'll turn it over to Angela to share some of these other questions that we thought this group would come up with for us. But
Sure, let me just share my screen here, Joanne. All right. One of the things that we thought we would get asked is how were some municipalities able to have smaller increases? So like I mentioned before, our operational and inflationary increases are in line with other municipalities. That would have brought us to 3.4 to 6.4%. But then through our priorities, we're proposing some other initiatives like adding more RCMP members and municipal staff, as well as 4 more firefighters. So like I mentioned before, staff worked really hard to keep the cost pressures down as much as possible. And although I can't speak specifically as to how other places balance their budgets, most of them try to offset increases between fees and charges and taxes. So for example, Summerland raised their utility rates by 10% for the year. So it's not surprising that they proposed a lower tax increase for 2023. And, you know, in doing some of my research, I found that Kelowna specifically stated publicly that their budget was an essentials only budget. So, you know, lots of municipalities are doing different things to try to keep their tax rates as low as possible. Okay, another question we thought we might get asked was why can't we just keep drawing from surplus? So the current financial plan contemplates draws from surplus with the continuation of the phase in of the deferral, and estimated over the next few years is between $3 to $5 million, depending on what council does for a tax increase. Drawing from surplus is a temporary measure. There's only so many funds that can be drawn on, and once they're depleted, a more significant increase would be needed as the draw would be compounding over time. So if you think of it like using your savings account to subsidize your monthly spending, eventually your savings would run out and you'd either need to make more money or reduce your expenses. Okay, what does fiscal sustainability mean? Because we do like to throw that out and we do like to say it. Being fiscally sustainable doesn't mean that the city doesn't spend money. It means that we spend the amount of money needed to provide the services the community wants, while not creating a future burden in our assets for the community in the future. So really kind of ties in with a few of the questions that were asked earlier. Some of what the city does is it provides a certain level of service to the community. During COVID, one of the things we did was we went out and asked the community, what level of service do you want? Should we be mowing less? Should we be doing the garbages less often? And actually what we heard back, even during the tough times of COVID, was people wanted the service levels to stay as they are. So that is generally how we build the budget, is with the current service levels. And then through feedback from the public and direction from council, those things can be changed that way. And then the last one was just the climate action one that we covered already with a question from Lori.
And I have one for you, Angela. Actually, it's more, I think it's more, I think it's something that maybe you want to stop sharing, but I think it's more something that, you know, I find very interesting about the budget that I would like for the community to know. And that's just how much of our budget goes to protective services. And because I think that's a really important a point for people to understand.
Yeah, and I did mention it a little bit earlier on the slide where we talked about the general operating expenses. So of the 63 million that we spend on general operating, 41% of that is on safety. So that's fire, bylaw, and RCMP. So, and one of the things I wish I maybe mentioned, I think, Gary, when you had your question a little while back, was that some of the significant increases you're seeing are because of the safety that was added through the budget last year. And that's what we heard from the community. Community wanted more safety. So we've increased our RCMP by 20% over the last 4 or 5 years, because that's what the community wants. So there is a cost to those, unfortunately, and RCMP specifically are very expensive. It's $204,000 per member. That's a fully loaded cost that we get from the government. But once we have those members, it's a contractual agreement to fund them. And so as they increase the amount that we have to pay, the city does have to incorporate that somehow into our revenues, right? So typically speaking, I'd say every year there's about 1% that's added just to cover contractual costs for RCMP. That's not adding new members, that's just covering the cost of the existing ones.
Great, thanks for that. So that's all our questions. Does anyone else have anything they want to say before we wrap up for the evening? Oh, Councillor Miller, is that a new hand up?
Yes, it is. I just, because I wanted to listen tonight, except for pointing out that one thing about a council meeting. But if anybody would like to meet me in person, I will be there from 4 till 7. And for those that I haven't met, my phone number is 460-2646, 460-2646. If you have any concerns, I'm generally available in the evening, so I would be glad to, I guess, talk to you. But hope that you will come out on Thursday, and hope that you will say hello.
Is
Thanks,
this a good
Councillor
time,
Miller.
Joanne, maybe for me to share the screen so you
Oh,
can
yes.
talk about the feedback form in the open house? Because we do actually,
you're right.
Councillor Miller just reminded me that we actually have slides on that.
Yeah, that's right. So very typical for our process. We try to gather feedback in any number of ways, trying to make it as easy as possible. So I've taken notes of what was said tonight, but if you want to kind of formally submit your response or your thoughts, we have a few questions on our feedback form just to make sure that the priorities in this budget are the priorities that you see, and also just gather your general feedback on the budget. So we're collecting feedback until March 10th, and I'll be sharing the results at the start of budget deliberations on March 14th. And then again, this is the first, people. Like, I know many of you have come to open houses in the past, but council has wanted to host this open house. So all of council is planning to be there on March 9th from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Penticton Trade and Convention Center. So this is your opportunity to have discussions in person with council. And also supporting it, we will have our budget display, so you can talk to our finance staff. And also we're making it a big showing for protective services. It's a big part of the budget, so we'd like you to have the chance to talk to Superintendent Hunter, Fire Chief Larry Watkinson, and Bylaw Services Manager Tina Mercier. So any questions you've ever had about their initiative and how things are going, they're going to be there, and it's a great time to come in and say hello. And then we're rounding it out with the most exciting utility rate review, so you can always talk about that because it's an important part of the budget as well. So that's what's happening at our council open house. And you can say hi to myself. I'll be there as well with Angela. And is that our last one? And obviously, thank you. We do really appreciate when the citizens take an interest. And as you, several of you articulated so well, it's very complicated. And despite that, you asked some really hard questions. And so kudos to you. That was very challenging and we really appreciate it. So thanks again. And with that, we'll let you return to your evening. Did you want to say something, Councillor Miller?
No, just good night, everybody.
Okay.
Thanks for participating.
All right. Good night, everybody. See you Thursday.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate your attendance.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Angela. Bye-bye.